talking football all day, every day. Make sure you subscribe, like the video, share it with your friends. Let's roll, baby. What is going on, everybody? John Middlecoff, 3 and Out podcast. Today, on this Sunday, it's going to be a heavy mix. You're flipping around. I mean, there's nothing on television. Watch gymnastics. Watch the men's basketball team take on Jokic this morning. And Kevin Durant went nuts. But this is one of those times I think I saw earlier in the weekend. This is our last weekend without football for like 6 months next week. If you count the Hall of Fame game, which, listen, a lot of randoms will be playing in that game. But it's football. It's the NFL. And then preseason starts within the next week, and we're off and running. Then college football, then the NFL actually starts. So we're not that far away. We're not that far away. This was truly like, I don't have anything to do this weekend. It's super hot outside. And I didn't do anything. Besides, I watched some coaches' press conferences, watched Harbaugh. He's a beauty. Also going on, if you haven't checked that out with Colin, we did a long, meaty football podcast just on everything that's going on with the quarterback signing and other stuff going on in the NFL. So you can check that out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts on Colin's feed. So today, mailbag heavy, fire in the DMs. This is something we do basically on every podcast, but this is going to be strictly mailbag for Monday. So I'm going to go to one of those games if your team's making a little run. Obviously, football's right around the corner. Been saying forever. Next, I'm talking a big one, and that still has potential. Some may say it's my 40th birthday this fall, so I got to do something fun and enjoyable for that. So we might have to make it to a big college football game. And if you want to do one of those things, concerts, I've all I hear about. I've been to Vegas and seen the Sphere, but I've never been to a concert. Obviously, the Grateful Dead, who I don't really listen to, but I haven't heard one person say that it's not an incredible experience seeing a concert there. So if you want to do that, I got you covered because of my friends. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code JOHN, J-O-H-N, for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Let's fire into the bag. We will start with our man Reese. Mailbag. 2028 Olympics in Los Angeles will feature flag football. How will owners, GMs, coaches, and players handle this? I'm sure the all-pro players would love to go to the Olympics and add a gold medal to their resume. But the Olympics will overlap with an important portion of off-season practices. Will we send veteran players who have earned it and can't afford to miss some off-season time? Or will we send practice squad players who can achieve the highlight of their career, dominate the international competition, pick up some publicity, and not cost the team key pieces during an intense portion of season prep? I'm sure this helps that the games are in LA this year, but can you imagine GMs wanting to send all-pro players to a place like Tokyo in August? Full disclosure, I obviously seen stuff on social media over the last year about flag football and guys like Tyreek, their interest in being involved. I do think it's really complicated. When you think about basketball and watching this morning, it's kind of crazy on Sunday morning. Obviously LeBron, top 2 or 3 player of all time. Curry and Durant, top 15 players. I think Jokic is going to go down as one of the top 15 players of all time. I mean, he's fucking incredible. Excuse my language for all the little kids listening. But you don't get injured a lot in basketball, right? Or at least the injury rate is much smaller. And I get it's flag football, but tearing an Achilles, tearing an ACL, I think the risk is so much higher, even in a 7-on-7 environment. I had the thought, I was clicking around the Olympics, and it's crazy with the Olympics. One, it's been diluted like surfing and skateboarding, and I'm not trying to be some boomer hater, but those are Olympic sports. But regardless, I was watching some handball, which I've never watched before until I think I was flipping around the channels on like Saturday. and you just go on Peacock and they just got a million things that you've missed in the middle of the night. And I watched handball. And one, it's just, it feels like a sport you would have played when you were 10 years old at recess. But I was thinking if I was like a retired athlete in the NBA or definitely the NFL, you would dominate that. You're so much faster, you're so much more physical. And I think that would be a sport where I don't understand why some of these retired guys, especially if you're retired or kind of forced to retirement in your late 20s, early 30s, rugby obviously is a little more physical. But I've said this forever because when I was in college, I lived with a bunch of rugby players that obviously, if our Americans train from a young age, we would annihilate people. Can you imagine like Fred Warner in the open field tackling people or Christian McCaffrey or Tyreek Hill? But obviously, those guys aren't going to play. But what if guys that were fringe NFL guys started training for that? And I know it's the sevens. It's a little more open. It's like 7-on-7 in basketball. But is anyone really worried about any of these guys getting injured in the NBA? Oh, playing 4 or 5 games of international play. We have a long history now. I think in football, these GMs and owners would be terrified. And I think from a player standpoint, it's pretty risky, right? If you have a major injury, something freaky happens, you're playing. Who are you playing? So a guy landing on your leg or hitting you across the middle. Part of when you go, and I learned this when I was at Fresno State and definitely in the NFL, and I've been going to camps forever, and you see this. Coaches are always a little nervous early on in OTAs and early on in training camp when it comes to younger players transitioning with the vets because the speed, the ability to like not bring a guy to the ground, but still hit and move. And there's just an unease with kind of everyone watching. And I think that would be on full display in this flag football situation. So my recommendation, if you're a sweet athlete and you play like Division I college football, maybe a couple years practice squad, go dominate handball. You could become a handball legend. I'm talking a legend. And if you really kind of want some more physicality, there's a little physicality in handball. Go play the sevens rugby for America. You would immediately, if you start training for a couple years, you could make the team. Who knows? Maybe resurrect our program. I guess resurrect probably be the wrong word because I don't think we've ever been good, but you know what I mean. Question for the podcast. Hey, John, I'm 31 years old, and being a lifelong Texans fan, I can't lie when I say I'm definitely excited for this upcoming season. But at the same time, I feel like the hype surrounding our team has been a bit too high. I'm glad the Texans realized what they had in Stroud early and surrounded him with talent. I think surrounding a good young quarterback still on his rookie deal with talent is the best way to win a Super Bowl. What should the expectations be for the Texans this year and say the next 5 years? I agree with the hype on the Texans. A lot of people think that they're just a Super Bowl contender. I would pump the brakes. I would kind of expect something similar to last year, which playoffs, win a playoff game. But I think for the next 2 to 3 years, your expectations can be really high. The number one thing you always have to find out, I think, at the pro level is sustaining high level success is really, really difficult, right? So for CJ Stroud to be a top 5 quarterback over the next 5 years means he's just going to dominate. And it's really, really hard. Now, his resume would say he was awesome at Ohio State, came to the NFL, had one of the truly great. I know statistically he might have had the best rookie season, but times are a little different in 2024 than maybe they were in 1983. But regardless, like one of the great rookie seasons in the history of the league for any position. And if he just continues to improve, anytime you have a quarterback who's that good, you got a chance to win it all if you build the team right. And like you said, the greatest asset they have is the rookie contract, which not all rookie contracts are the same. He is $7-8 million, but relative to what these quarterbacks are making, it's nothing. I think them and the Colts should make the playoffs. Like to me, new teams in the playoffs for the AFC would be. I think the Texans should make it again. The Colts should make it, and I think the Chargers make it as well. But listen, it's really, really hard to win AFC playoff games, right? You're playing Patrick Mahomes. If Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert are there, if Lamar Jackson, the Ravens, you got to go on the road there. That's difficult. If the Bengals are back in action and Joe Burrow, like it's a very tough conference to succeed in because of the talent at that position, right? If I forgot about the Bills, I mean, Josh Allen, who I think is easily the second best quarterback in the NFL. So your expectations should be really high. But like you said, if you go back-to-back years, win a playoff game, win the division again, that is really, really successful. But like you only get these moments so often where you have this team perfectly set up financially. I think, competing to be in the conference championship game would be a huge, huge success. I'm pretty sure you guys have never been there, right? Huge fan of the pod. For offensive coaches, this is from Jacob, like McVay and Kyle, what does their weekly film study look like when they are preparing for games? How much film do they typically watch? In number of games, and how long does it usually take? And do they watch both sides of the ball for just the opposing defenses? Well, I think it changes coach to coach. When you are a play caller and the head coach, I follow the Niners much more closely in terms of this type stuff than I do McVay, but let's just assume Kyle and Sean do very similar things. Kyle not only watches, I would say at minimum, 4 games on the previous opponent. Now, it also changes when you play divisional opponents because you played them so often. So when you play uncommon opponents, like if you are the Rams or the Niners and you're playing, I don't know, the Ravens or the Chargers, I'm just picking different AFC teams that you play once every 4 years, you might do more. But I know Kyle watches practice on both sides of the ball. So you're watching your own team, right? You're preparing as an offensive play caller, watching the opponent's defense if you're the offensive play caller, and I would say 4 to 6 games minimum. Now you have a staff working on situations, right? So when you see an offensive play caller who's the head coach, who has a run game coordinator, a pass game coordinator, the offensive line, like they have certain roles they play in the game plan, right? So when it comes to protections, the offensive line coach is all over that. So in terms of blitzes, that might be his breakdown. Your pass game coordinator is obviously breaking down weeks of coverages on the opponent. And then you have a quality control guy and an analyst that are always a week ahead. So if it's week 2, and let's just pick a game. Let's just say the Rams and the Niners are playing this week. And the following week, the Rams and the Niners play the Bengals and the Ravens, where your quality control guy is usually working a week ahead, as well as your advanced scout. So you have a lot of help that can get you cut ups and stuff like that, but you have to watch the team, right? So you break down practice, offense, and defense. And I know Kyle, and I would imagine McVay as well, helps with the defense. I'm not saying they are that involved, but they are definitely watching and have philosophical ideas of the way we should attack an opponent. Belichick was the master of that, right? Literally watched everything. Now, Bill was probably more involved in the kicking game as well as offense and defense. Like, Kyle's not involved in the kicking game at all. He's just not. I've never seen such a talented head coach give less whats about kicking and punting. He just wants you to punt it well and kick it well. And if you don't, we got a problem. But he's not very active in that. But he's very active. Because part of it, you got to constantly be evaluating your own team. Because if a guy gets injured, who are we bumping up? Who's playing well? How can you help out? How can you coach the coaches? The 49ers, I mean, this is well documented at this point, film everything. So Kyle Shanahan in his office, while he's getting ready and just doing his weekly work on a Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday, when the team is obviously with their position coaches, he can press a button and watch their meeting. It's microphone and videoed. So he can watch and listen to everything that's being said in that video or in that room on video. And, if they're having a serious conversation, I've heard assistant coaches say, we have access to turn it off. But players know. Like, you are mic'd up in your room 24/7, 365, unless you manually turn it off and he knows when you turn it off. So it's, in football, these coaches, and I can only speak, I've only been around one, but Andy Reid, I would say, is putting in 100-hour weeks. Because think about, that's just preparation for the game. What about all the other stuff? You're dealing with the GM, you're dealing with the owner. If a player gets in trouble, player has personal issues, You're dealing with the trainer. You're dealing with the equipment staff. You're dealing with travel. There's just not enough time in the day. It's why so many coaches love to get to the office super early because no one really bothers you from like 5 to 7:30. But once kind of breakfast time hits and everyone's in the building, you have no clue what's coming. But no one's going to really fuck with you unless someone got a DUI the night before at 5:45 in the morning. So you kind of have that time to yourself. But I heard McVay talk about this is he used to think I was never one of those people, and I'm still to this day. I need some sleep. I can, one, I get really grouchy. I get really edgy. My mind doesn't work. Like, I just can't operate back to back to back days off like 4 or 5 hours sleep. I need 7 to 8, right? Ideally, I go to bed at 10 if I can get up at 6:30. But I need sleep to operate at my highest level. Andy Reid does not. Andy Reid can operate at a really high level off like 4 or 5 hours. Some coaches can, some people can't. You know, they say some athletes are like that. Kobe Bryant, Tiger Woods, they don't sleep. They don't need much sleep. Michael Jordan, historically, needs no sleep. So it just depends on who you are. Even McVay's talked about, like, listen, I need to go home and get some rest. So yeah, I guess the answer, the long-winded way of saying it's a lot. It takes a lot of time watching, and they really don't stop until probably like Sunday morning. I mean, they're watching film Saturday night on the road, on the plane. You're just kind of, and there's a balance, right? Because you can like polarize yourself with too much information. Uh, Paralysis by analysis, I think, is the way a lot of people put it. It's tough. I just think you get in a groove. These guys are such kind of creatures of habit. They're just a routine. But as the head, as a coordinator, as a true OC or DC, if you're not the head coach, there's not that crazy much on your plate if something goes off the field, like wrong off the field. Whereas the head coach, you have to deal with that, and you have to deal with that immediately. Plus, you're talking to the media. You always have to deal with the owner. There's a lot going on. Not playing best ball at DraftKings? You're missing out. Here's what you need to know. DraftKings Best Ball Millionaire Contest is their biggest fantasy contest ever. We're talking 15 million guaranteed prize pool with that's right, two millionaires being crowned for the first and second place. If you're set it and forget it type, then Best Ball is for you. No waiver wires, no roster management, bigger roster so injuries won't end your season. Only the draft, and that's it. You're set for the year. 15 million prize pool. Still not convinced? Check this out. This year, DraftKings is offering everyone a Draft One, Get One special. Your $20 entry fee scores you a bonus ticket. Get in on all the best ball action. Download the DraftKings app and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for all customers who enter the NFL Best Ball 15 Millionaire contest to get a bonus ticket and get a shot at being crowned one of the 2 millionaires only on DraftKings. Question for the mailbag. First off, I'm not a Cowboys fan, but does everyone forget that Dak was in the MVP conversation last season? Lamar Jackson also hasn't done anything in the playoffs, and he got paid. Don't even get me started on Tua, Lawrence, and Cousins. Anyways, if they don't keep Dak, ... then what? It's rough starting over, coming from a Patriot fan. The difference here is this would be Dak's second huge contract, right? So if like Lamar keeps doing what he's doing, now he won the MVP last year, even though it was kind of a weird MVP season, but keeps failing in the playoffs, people are going to start talking about him like James Harden. Because after a while, no one cares what you do in the regular season. Like part of the reason we can hold Peyton Manning's regular seasons at such a high level, because he won a couple championships. Like Aaron Rodgers, the conversation around Aaron Rodgers would be dramatically different if he didn't have the ring. Now, it's a long time ago, but once you get that ring, no one can really say anything. And I think the problem here with Dak is like the amount of money. If Dak goes, Trevor Lawrence just got that. Trevor Lawrence just got that. What am I worth? And he's right. He's worth more. But, this is where the Cowboys are kind of in limbo. And I think I said this last week. I understand keep riding with Dak. Because what are you going to do? become the Raiders and just have good players at a couple different positions and have no quarterback, you got no shot. So it's easy to write it out. And clearly, I think I think they're kind of playing mental warfare. They're trying to see how he responds. But like, I don't think he didn't respond the last couple years in the playoffs because he's content and already rich. I just think I don't know if he kind of short circuits. He doesn't have the greatest arm. So if timing's a little off, he's more liable to throw a pick. But I'm with you. I would not expect Dak to hit free agency next year. I saw some clips of Trey Lance going viral of him airmailing balls all over the place. Obviously, he's not the answer. Dak's their best quarterback by a country mile. And let's face it, he's a top 12 guy in the NFL. I think where these conversations become so polarizing, we all know if they just let Dak hit free agency, like, what's their answer? What are they going to do? But the problem is he ever good enough to win the Super Bowl? And my answer is simple. And I said this about Tua, like, there is a lot of value in Tua. He can help have you compete. You're never going to win the division with him, as we see, because the Bills and Josh Allen are just going to win way more games in November and December, and he's just dramatically better. But Tua does give them credibility. They can compete and make the playoffs. They might be one and done, but there's something to be said about being a playoff team than being just always terrible, which the Dolphins have been a lot of my life. And with Dak Prescott, you have been competing to win 12, 13 games a year. I mean, that's a fact. That's not like that's an objective take. So I think that's very, very difficult to pivot from. And that's why I would expect him to probably stay. If you're a betting man, you would bet on Dak Prescott to be the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys for the next 5 years. I've been a Panther fan my whole life. Lots of ups and more downs, like right now. Do you think Bryce can be a franchise quarterback in the National Football League? I heard Coward on a show the other day talk about Dak going to Carolina if they're still struggling this upcoming season. Do you think that could happen? And if it would help, if it would even help given how bad the skill positions are? I think Dak would be much more, his viability with the Raiders to me would make a lot more sense. They are desperate for a quarterback. When you invest as much as they invested in Bryce Young, I think you get 3 years. Now, I might be wrong on this because I loved him coming out of college. Because you watched him at Alabama, it's like, this kid's a baller. I mean, he was a stud. But just because you're a great college player, you do have to have some physical skills that translate to the NFL. He's not a great athlete. He's not even, I would say, for NFL standards, he's a marginal athlete. He's very tiny. And it was eye-opening to see his size on an NFL field. He doesn't have a great arm. And obviously he's short. So he has a lot working against him. Like, you watch CJ Stroud, like, just the way he looks in the huddle, standing behind the line of scrimmage, he looks like an NFL quarterback. You watch Bryce standing there, you go, I've never seen anything like this. Kyler Murray, who has similar height to Bryce, is one of the great athletes in the NFL, has an absolute howitzer, and it's just, I mean, has way more physical skills. So what are some of Kyler's best plays? He can run around and make shit happen. That's not really Bryce's thing. He's a pocket quarterback. It's Tua. Right now, Tua's bigger than Bryce, but they're pocket play. We never say these names, but like Phillip Rivers, Eli Manning, like that's how they have to play. Well, Carson Palmer, listen, I understand most people on this podcast have never met these human beings. I met Carson Palmer one time. He was bigger than half the dudes on the Golden State Warriors. I used to go to Raider games because I did the post game and stay on the sideline and watch Eli and Phillip Rivers. These are fucking massive human beings. I mean, enormous. They look like small forwards, the modern day power forward in the NBA. With cleats on and a helmet, they feel like they're 6'7", 6'8". They're huge. Peyton Manning, did you see the pictures going viral of Peyton Manning talking to all the NBA guys in France? It's not like LeBron and Jason Tatum and some of these guys were that much bigger than him. It's like 6'5", 6'6". So it's very, very difficult to be a pocket quarterback and be a tiny little dude. It really is. The reason Kyler can have success is one, he does have an elite arm, and two, just has elite athleticism. So I feel like I'm being pretty negative there, but I don't feel really good about it. I'm not going to write the guy off, but if it was a stock, I would short him. My name is Kevin, and I'm a balls to the wall Charger fan. 45 years now. I'd like your take on something. Can you see the Chargers winning at least 10 games and punching their postseason ticket this year? Let's look at this one way. We have a complete 180 when it comes to the coaching and philosophy with Harbaugh and his amazing staff. Don't you think that the receivers that we have will flourish if Harbaugh and Roman with their style of football? Picture this. The Chargers run the ball with ease. So much so that they will be able to run play action when the opposing defense is leaning forward to stop this run game. Herbert looks like a different dude physically. The edge group is the deepest in the league, which makes the secondary life easier. There is a reason Jim Harbaugh is successful everywhere he goes. And these guys are brought in and they are hungry. I will say this. We're going to do a big gambling pod, probably closer to the season. And I was looking the other day, spent about an hour just siphoning through some bets. I think my favorite bet on the board, I'm tempted to do this. I don't usually do future bets because one, I'm not going to bet a couple $100. That doesn't do anything for my juices. But the amount of money I'd have to bet to really kind of get me going would be a decent chunk of change, 5 to 10 grand if I was going to go all in on one future. But I don't really want to lock up $5,000 or $10,000 for 4 months. Like that kind of sucks. But I was thinking like maybe I should do it this year. Maybe we have a bet of the year. And I think my bet of the year, just looking around at some future bets, was this on DraftKings, the Chargers to make the playoffs at plus 110. So if you bet $1,000, you'd win 2,100. If you bet 10 grand, you'd win $11,000. And I saw that, and I'm not going to lie, I kind of loved it. And that might be my bet. And there were some other ones, like I think the Bills over, the Dolphins under. I wrote it down in my phone on a notepad, but I think my favorite one that I saw was the Chargers to make the playoffs. And that might be worth it because people historically thought I was a Charger hater. No, I just thought Brandon Staley was a raging fraud. I mean, I don't think it gets any more fraudulent than what we saw as a head coach and what he was doing with the Chargers. And Jim Harbaugh is the opposite. And I've watched a lot of Charger press conferences and Charger content since Jim has been there. One major difference I see in Jim now, one, he's obviously older and a little skinnier than when he was with the 49ers. But there's like a looseness and security's probably the wrong way to put it, but he had this enormous chip on his shoulder. I would say at the Stanford and 49er days. He was trying to prove to the world something. And I don't know if it was the last couple of years at Michigan kicking everyone's ass and then finally winning a national championship, but there's like a looseness to him. Now he's still pretty crazy. In a press conference, it's July 27th. And I think Rashawn Slater had left the practice field a couple days ago. And then the next day he wasn't on the practice field. Clearly he just like tweaked a hammy or rolled an ankle. It was something pretty innocuous. And these reporters are asking Jim, all Jim has to say, listen, he's going to be fine. He missed a couple days. No big deal. Jim refuses to talk about it. And he's like, it's like, Jim, but that's kind of Harbaugh. He's very uncomfortable doing the injury stuff. But there is a looseness to him that he didn't have the last time. But we know philosophically, his football, the way he wants to play has never changed. And the way he plays always works. It worked in the 60s. It works in the 70s. It worked 10 years ago when he was with the Niners. It works now. That's going to translate. He has the most talented quarterback he's ever had. His offensive line should be pretty good. And we know defensively, like, his defenses are just good. And if anything, they overachieve. Why? Because that's the way they practice. So I think my favorite bet this year is to bet the Chargers to make the playoffs on DraftKings plus 110. I don't like it. I love it. And honestly, I don't think I could love it anymore.
Preparing for your upcoming fantasy football draft, do you wish that you could wave a magic wand and somehow know who exactly your league mates are going to take? Well, with Draft Intel from Fantasy Pros, you'll know exactly how your league mates draft better than they do. Draft Intel will automatically analyze your league's history to see who rushes to the draft board first to take a quarterback, who takes too many rookies, and who is going to reach for their favorite team's players over and over again. Everybody hates a homer, and every league has one of them. But right now, you can put all that intel to the test by bringing those patterns directly into a mock draft and make your mock draft feel like the real thing. Check out fantasypros.com/volume today to get an edge over your league mates right now and forever.
Have a Fugazi for the show that literally just happened, and I think you'll get a good laugh. My first thought was that I have to DM John Middlecoff. Spelled it wrong, but good effort. I pull up to get gas behind the car. I just took the hose out of the car, so I'm pumped that I'm next, no pun intended, only to see the person put the pump back and walk into the store. Now I have to have the internal struggle. Do I wait this out? I could come right out, or do I change lanes, which I'd have to wait again behind somebody else? This person was inside the bathroom, scratch it, got a drink, who knows what, but 10 minutes later, 4 cars to my left got gas, and the dude comes out. You couldn't pull up to the open parking spot in front of the store. I do think that's terrible etiquette. I think you have to do that move either while you're pumping, lock your car, or just immediately park, go in, do whatever you got to do, then come out and pump. But if you go pump and finish and someone's waiting behind you, you got to get a move on. So if you're going to go to the bathroom, if you're going to do whatever inside, I think that's got to be your immediate move before you pump, or just bang out, 2 birds with 1 stone. Boom, pump, lock the car. No one can steal anything. Go inside, do whatever you need to do, come out. It's done. You can take off. That's usually my move, I would say. Pump, lock car, go in, grab a snack. Why all the Raiders hate? Hey, John, Larry here, using my wife's Instagram. Why is everyone picking the Raiders to finish last in the division? The last time we lost to the Broncos, we were the Oakland Raiders. 10 in a row. And we split with the Chargers every year. We were the second best team in the division last year with a rookie quarterback that over his last 5 games, 9 touchdowns versus 1 interception. We also had the number 1 defense in the league after Pierce took over, giving up 16 points a game. I think it's pretty simple. One, I don't think anyone beside a Raider fan would say you have the 4th best coach in the league or in the division, right? Obviously, you definitely don't have a top 2 coach in your division between Andy and Harbaugh. We can debate Sean Payton, but I am sorry, like everyone's taking Sean Payton over Antonio Pierce. You have no quarterback. You can give me these stats. Like, I'm sorry, once you suck ass, teams don't take you as seriously in December. Now, you beat the Chiefs. It's like, oh, we beat the Chiefs. I get that a lot. Yeah, then they went on to win the Super Bowl, and you guys didn't even sniff the playoffs. So you have some really good players. You have some core all-pro guys that are awesome. Every team in the league would want. But if you're rolling in to a season with Aiden O'Connell, and it's like, well, Gardner Minshew was 1 pass away from the playoffs. Yeah, with Shane Steichen, who is widely considered already like a top 5 OC in the league. Who's your OC? Oh, Luke Getsy, the guy everyone laughed at in Chicago. Now, I've defended a little bit because Justin Fields, not the easiest guy to coach, not very accurate, but I'm sorry. Like, I think 8 wins would be an incredible accomplishment. I really do. You cannot be good in the NFL, especially in your conference, playing with those 2 quarterbacks. I just don't think it's possible. So I don't even think it's hate. I just think it's simply, let me pull up your schedule. Let's just go through the first couple games. You open with the Chargers. We split with the Chargers all the time. Yeah, they've had terrible coaches. Like, I'm sorry, I have a hard time seeing you beat Jim Harbaugh. Second game, on the road versus the Ravens. Don't really love you there. Panthers, okay. Browns at home. Your roster isn't remotely close. Now, we'll see. I don't love Deshaun Watson, but if you win that game, 2-2. Broncos in Denver. I think the streak ends there. Steelers at home. Possible. Didn't beat them last year, though. Rams on the road. Don't love that one. Chiefs coming to Vegas. Well, listen, your guy just had a doll of Patrick Mahomes. If you don't think, and listen, the Chiefs are worried about the Super Bowl, you're worried about going 500, which here's the other thing. You got to factor in your organization. You've been above 500 2 times in 2 decades. 2 times. So I would expect the Chiefs to murder you on the road against the Bengals, on the road against the Dolphins, Broncos at home, on the road against the Chiefs, the Bucks, who playoff team last year, Falcons pretty good, Jags. I just think it's going to be really, really difficult for you guys. I do. Now, I don't think you're like a 3-win team, but you go 7-8 wins and not really be remotely that close to the playoffs. So I don't think it's hate. When you suck all the time and never make the playoffs, people just assume that's what's going to happen. And you go, well, who's their quarterback? Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew. What are people supposed to say? Love the Raiders this year. 10+ wins. It'd be one of the biggest stories in the NFL. They just made the playoffs with Aiden O'Connell. You give me Aiden O'Connell stats, he's not even the starting quarterback. For the mailbag, it feels like the league would be better if the NFL got rid of the franchise tag entirely, allowing star players to be in free agency. And overall, I think seeing this would be more interesting and would also make the offseason better. Your thoughts? Totally disagree. I think the NFL has separated for several reasons. One, once a week, all the games matter. But two, I was watching the Olympic team this morning. Steph Curry is such an outlier. Of all the older guys on the team, they have been on countless teams, right? They've all moved around the league. LeBron, Kevin Durant, you're talking mercenaries, right? It's Devin Booker. It's like, what's his next team? That's all we talk about. Joel Embiid forever. It's like, where's he going to go next? Jason Tatum. It's like, could he be on the Celtics for 15 years? Probably not. The one thing with the original Dream Team was like all their guys, Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, Michael Jordan, Clyde, the majority of their team was on one squad. David Robinson, Charles Barkley played on, I guess he ended up playing on 3, but you know what I mean. And when I was a kid, the NBA, like the core players played on the team for a decade. And the NFL, star players, if I don't want to lose you, you're not going anywhere. Doesn't mean you're not going to get paid. No, the NFL, one, has made more millionaires than any business in the history of business. And two, franchise tag, most of these guys end up getting a long-term extension. So I actually like the franchise tag. I think it's because it benefits the fan. And the reason the NFL has lapped everyone else is because it's by far the most fan-friendly league. Easiest to consume, everything matters. And I think the offseason, yeah, you don't get Kevin Durant and LeBron James and that type of stuff, that type movement. But for the most part, it's good enough. The NFL isn't dependent on the offseason. Really, their offseason, the biggest moment is the draft. They crush for 6 months during the season. So I think that's a huge point of difference for football than the other sports happen. I mean, baseball, their free agency is a joke. It starts and dudes don't start or sign to like mid-spring training. Here's my question. What is the quality or qualities that the Green Bay Packers saw in Love in college, that the Chiefs saw in Mahomes in college, that the rest of the NFL seemingly did not? What are the qualities their leadership team is seeing to instill the confidence in these guys? Well, both guys played on shitty teams, right? Utah State was not very good when he was there. And obviously Texas Tech was battling to win 6-7 games. I think one year, was last year, you go 7-5 at Texas Tech. So you're having to do more with less. And in that, both guys have big time arm talent. right? Mahomes has one of the great arms we've ever seen, and we saw with last year with Jordan Love. Like, they have special arm talent. And I wouldn't call them like Lamar Jackson or Kyler Murray athletes, but they are good athletes. So they can move, scramble to make throws with plus arm. And then it just goes, obviously, Jordan Love more than Mahomes. Can we mold this guy? I watched Jordan Love a little bit of his press conference and then an interview he did. I think the NFL Network was there. He's just a really, really impressive guy, really mature. And part of being a quarterback, maturity, focus, how serious you take the craft. I remember Veach and talking to another buddy with the Chiefs. I think after they won the AFC Championship game, either this year or last year, Mahomes, like, they got to the building the next day at like 6:30 to start getting Super Bowl preparations, and he was already in the training room getting work done, watching film. Like, the level of focus the high end guy and listen, you never know, but that's when it comes to scouting, talking to people about him, how he'll handle money. Like, you watch Jordan Love talk about just like the money. You go, God, just usually like betting on guys that money is not going to change the way they operate. Let's face it, for most of us, if we got 150, Jordan Love's contract, the $75 million signing bonus, he gets $25 million this week. I think he gets $25 million October 4th, and then he gets like $25 million. I forget the exact date, December 10th or 12th. So by before Christmas, he'll have made $75 million. I don't care who you are. You could be 70 years old, but if you're 25 years old and you get $75 million, now taxes or whatever, I don't know net what he'll actually get, 40, $50 million. If that doesn't change you, you're pretty dialed as a human being. And we've seen it with Mahomes, unfazed. Mahomes probably couldn't be any richer. I mean, I don't even can't even comprehend how much cash that guy has in his bank account, how much his financial guys have invested for him. He's just like an ATM machine. And it's like, God, you just watch him play. So this is where it gets to love of the game, how much passion you have for it. If you don't love football, once you get paid, the money will phase you. Just like if you don't like whatever you do, if I pay you an astronomical amount of money, you simply will not work as hard. It's a fact. So I think these teams, one, as much as it is on the guy, both organizations, because of Andy and the Chiefs, the way they operate, and obviously the Packers, have a fantastic infrastructure to surround these guys and help them out and mentor them, support them. So if you are a high level guy, it's set up to succeed. And let's face it, some organizations are set up for you to fail. They're not buttoned up. They don't know what they're doing. They don't have good offensive staff, good offensive personnel, and it all snowballs. And then you just fall apart. So if I get a guy with a bunch of talent, a guy who's very focused, a guy who's very, very passionate and loves football, because you got to be an addict. You have to be an addict and basically be a crackhead. Football's crack. If you're not at that position, it'll weed you out. And we've seen a lot of guys with talent just never have a shot because of the time in which you have to put in. You got to be consumed by it. It's not the healthiest thing. It's why it's mentally very taxing. And these guys that can handle it go on to have a lot of success if they have the high level physical traits, which clearly Mahomes does, and it looks like Jordan Love has as well. I know you aren't as big an NBA fan as you once were, but why do you think NFL GMs are more willing to give up valuable assets, such as first round picks, to maximize their Super Bowl window with older guys like Brady, Rodgers, and Stafford than NBA GMs like Pelinka and Dunleavy, who hold on to less valuable first round picks and assets instead of mortgaging their future to maximize their current window with older guys, LeBron James and Steph Curry? Well, the business models are a lot different, right? The way the two caps work. So there is a balance. Like the Rams are a good example. They really need their first round picks now. We're in the NBA because I could hit on pick 28. The drafts are so different in the NBA and the NFL. I mean, how many guys in a given NBA draft hit? 15 in 2 rounds? How many guys in NFL draft hit? I mean, you got guys in every round hit. You got undrafted free agents hitting. So I think it has more to do. Those two guys are good examples. Like LeBron is 40 years old. So if I'm going to go get a sweet player and I got to mortgage 3 or 4 picks, LeBron's not going to be there in a couple years. And then I'm in major trouble. But I'm with you. Like, why do you care about 3 years from now? Most NFL teams, the good ones, are very consumed with the present. Where I think these NBA, now part of it is the owners, these algorithms they're using. I listened to my guy Kawakami had on Joe Lacob, and he just kept talking about his models. And I think in the NFL, it's just like not for long trying to win now. Or the NBA, listen, you can give LeBron a lot of shit. He's gotten a lot of guys traded. He never wants to take any credit for all the movement on his teams, but he is consumed with now. And if you wanted to be critical of Steph, he doesn't force their hand as much. Now, LeBron sometimes forces their hand for like Russell Westbrook. It's like, that's stupid. Where I think Curry is definitely involved, but he never kind of holds their feet to the fire. Like, I might leave. Like, LeBron takes it like, I might leave. Curry's never done that. We're in the NFL. When you have a star quarterback, you got to put all your chips in the middle of the table. So I think that's probably long-winded way of saying I think they're just two completely different businesses. And the other thing with the NFL, if I trade my first round pick, I can still hit on like third, fourth, fifth round picks. Where in basketball, that's kind of my only asset to make a trade. So the trade better be right. Where if I could trade a first round pick right now for, I don't know, some sweet player, right? Let's just say like I could just trade my first round pick for Fred Warner. I might do that and be like, well, I don't have a first round pick in 2025, but now Fred Warner's on my team. So I got the best middle linebacker. And why can't I hit on my second, third, and fourth round pick? So I think it's a lot different that way. With you have way more ammunition in football with other rounds. I mean, look at the Rams 2 years ago; they hit on all the mid-round picks. Where in basketball, it's if you hit on a second-round pick, you're like, that's unheard of. It's very, very rare to get a starter in the second round, let alone a high-end player. You get star players all the time in the second, third, fourth round. Okay, last question. Question for the mailbag. It's from Nicholas. Why are the Eagles seen as some shoo-in to be good? We don't like the head coach. They lost their best player to retirement. I don't think he's their best player. You could say their most important player to retirement. Honestly, they lost two of their most important players to retirement in terms of leadership. Kelsey, didn't Fletcher Cox retire as well? The quarterback has really only been good for one of his 4 seasons, and he's still a question mark. The team, but most specifically their defense, was awful last year. What am I missing? Well, their team is really talented. I mean, I think it's just that simple. Even though they lost Kelsey, they have drafted so many offensive linemen. They have 2 stud tackles. Landon Dickerson's a really good player. I think we just believe in their operation as an offensive line. Their offensive line coach is one of the best in the league. Even if you go, okay, Jalen is up and down, they add Saquon Barkley, who's one of the best just skill guys in the league. They arguably have the best 1-2 combination at wide receiver in Devontae and A.J. Brown. They have a really good tight end. And defensively, I think we got some question marks with their D-line. They had Huff from the Jets. They've drafted the 2 kids the last 2 years from Carter and Davis. They still have Brandon Graham. They drafted the best corner in the draft. And they got another corner in the draft, the white dude from Iowa. So I just think their team is really talented. They add Kellen Moore, who's been a good offensive coordinator in the league, and Vic Fangio, who I think is one of the better defensive coordinators. Now, I'm not picking them as some Super Bowl team, but their roster is pretty damn good. Their roster, to me, is top 2 or 3 in the NFC. 49ers, them, the Lions. Still some question marks with the Packers defense, but the Rams, like their team is they have the most talented team in their division. And the Cowboys lost a lot. I think Washington's probably a year away. I know a lot of people are going to pick them. I think Coward. I'm not. Not because I love the GM, like the coach. I could just see this being a little bit of a figured out year for them. The Giants, their D line's good. Neighbors is sweet, but is Daniel Jones any good? Saquon's been their best offensive player the last couple years. A lot of new offensive line pieces. We'll have to see how that comes together. But I think the Eagles win the division. And it doesn't mean Jalen Hurts is the MVP or anything. But I'm with you. But here's the thing with Sirianni. What's he doing? Calling timeouts? Giving pump up speeches? It's ultimately on Kellen Moore and Vic Fangio, who both guys, as coordinators, have proven to be like playoff level coordinators. Now, what they do in January, a lot of question marks. But I think it would be a pretty big upset if they're not in the playoffs. So I shoe in to be good. I don't know if I'd go like shoe in to be how good. I have a hard time seeing them with less than 10 wins. Now, I don't think they're a 14-win team, but I could see 10, 11 wins and win the division. Okay, you guys know the drill. Fire in those DMs. Appreciate everyone who did. Keep doing it because the mailbag, we're hitting the ground running, baby. Most teams, pads are on Monday. I'm recording this on Sunday, so you're going to see a lot of highlights coming out all over the NFL. Can't wait. And let's get excited, baby. Football's back.